of the Old Boys Association, Mr. Olcott Oration. Joint Secretaries, Mr. Judicial and Mr. Committee Chairman of Olcott Oration 2019, Mr. Sri Lanka, and finally the head prefect of Ananda College, Judicial.
Please rise for the national and the college anthem.
Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Dutiyaṃ-pi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Dutiyaṃ-pi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Dutiyaṃ-pi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Tatiyaṃ-pi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Tatiyaṃ-pi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Tatiyaṃ-pi Saṅghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi Pānātipātā vērmani sikkhapaдаṃ samādhiyāmi Adinādānā vērmani sikkhapaдаṃ samādhiyāmi Kāmesu miccācārā vērmani sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi Musāvādā vērmani sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi Surāmērē majjapamādāṭṭhānā vērmani sikkhapadaṃ samādhiyāmi
Seats. May I now invite this evening's orator, Mr. Maitri Panagoda, Principal, Mr. S.M. Kirtiratna, and President of the Old Boys Association, Mr. Dushmanta Karamnagoda, to garland the portraits of Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, Vadiba Singha, Venerable Migettuatte Gunananda Thera, and Venerable Hikkaduwe Sri Sumangala Nayaka Thera, respectively, the three key individuals who spearheaded the movement of Buddhist revival in Ceylon and the creation of Ananda. Ladies and gentlemen, a small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can change the course of time. History is often misunderstood as a grand narrative of great events or stories of great men and women. But what we must realize, ladies and gentlemen, is that history is an account of what we've been blessed with today. More than just a narrative, history is what's left behind for the present and the future that may determine the fate of society or even a nation. The story of the English Buddhist Academy, Ananda, is one such account. By the late 19th century, the people of Ceylon had been through troubled times under colonial rule. The common people, losing faith in each other, lost their sense of nationalism and devotion to the country. The socio-economic and socio-political backgrounds were highly detrimental on the people of British Ceylon. The countrymen received lesser representation in governing the country. The Colebrook-Cameron reforms of 1833, the first manifestation of a constitutional government in Ceylon, saw only one Sinhalese, one Tamil, and one Burgher under legislation. Buddhism was consistently deprived of its proper place. In 1817, the public holiday given for Poya was abolished. By 1876, 140,000 rupees was spent on missionary education, while approximately 2.4 million Buddhists, Hindus, and Islamists received nothing at all. Venerable Hikkaduwe Sri Sumangala Thera, Ratmalane Dharma Soka Thera, and Ratmalane Dharma Rama Thera took charge of Pirivana education, a way forward to stand up against the discrimination. During such turbulent times, a turning point was the famed five-fold debates. And this, in turn, ladies and gentlemen, brought about the man who changed the fate of Buddhism in this country forever, Colonel Henry Steele Olcott. When Colonel Olcott arrived in Ceylon in 1880, there were only a few schools that provided education for Buddhists, and the total attendance at these schools were less than 300. Whereas there were 805 missionary schools with a total attendance of approximately 78,000. On the other hand, while Buddhist schools received roughly 550 rupees as a grant annually, the Christian schools, the missionary schools, received almost 175,000 rupees. Colonel Olcott saw this discrimination. He realized that if Buddhism was to prevail in this country, in Ceylon, the way forward was through education. Colonel Olcott, together with Venerable Hikkaduwe Sri Sumangala Thera and Venerable Migettuatte Gunananda Thera, reached out to the hearts of many Buddhists with Saraswati Sandarasa, the Buddhist Catechism, the Buddhist Defense Committee, working to reinstate the Vesak full moon Boya Day as a public holiday, and designing the Buddhist flag. So, ladies and gentlemen, the amalgamation of all this was what began on the 1st of November 1886 at a small two-storied shelter at number 61 Malibon Street, Petta, the English Buddhist Academy, Ananda. Ladies and gentlemen, that same dwelling that sheltered 37 students under Charles Webster Leadbeater's headship still stands strong at the very same location in Petta, now preserved as an archaeological site. We wouldn't have had a place like this today, ladies and gentlemen, if it wasn't for Colonel Henry Steele Olcott. At a turbulent time such as this, he still mustered the strength, the courage, the capacity to move forward and make sure that the people of British Ceylon realize that the way forward to revive Buddhism in Ceylon was education, and the pinnacle of education, of Buddhist education, was Ananda. One might ask, ladies and gentlemen, where would Buddhism have taken its course if it wasn't for Ananda? Which is why I believe that this is not just a school. Ananda is a testament of everything our ancestors fought for. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, you and I have been blessed to have walked on this sacred ground for which they sacrificed their blood, sweat, and tears for. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, this pinnacle stands atop even today, symbolizing the spirit of Buddhism, signifying Colonel Henry Steele Olcott's staggering devotion to our country. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Olcott Oration 2019. Now, to commence this evening's proceedings, I'd like to invite the President of the Old Boys Association, Mr. Dushmanta Karannagoda, to welcome this esteemed gathering.
Ayubowan, Venerable Mahasangha, Mr. S.M. Kirthiratna, Principal, Ananda College, respected past presidents of the OBA, distinguished All Anandian, Mr. Maitri Panagoda, who is delivering the Olcott Oration 2019, and Mrs. Panagoda, Your Excellencies, distinguished invitees, Vice President, OBA and Project Chairman, Mr. Asanga Pridarshana, Deputy Principals, Assistant Principals, and members of the tutorial staff and students, fellow Anandians and their ladies, friends. I am greatly honored to welcome you to Colonel Henry Steele Olcott Memorial Oration 2019. The mission of our visionary founders was to open the doors for the Buddhist students to reach the highest levels and positions in society, both locally and internationally, by providing them with a high standard of education in English under a religious environment. Anandians have certainly lived up to this expectation over the years, and in fact, Sri Lankans have just elected a distinguished old Anandian, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, as the 7th Executive President of Sri Lanka. I am sure all of you will join me in wishing His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa all the very best for an extremely successful tenure of office, during which Sri Lanka will take the right path to solve the problems the country is faced with and head for being a politically stable and economically developed country in keeping with this vision. Today, We have another distinguished son of Ananda, Mr. Maitri Panagoda, who has reached great heights in his chosen field, the legal profession in Australia, to deliver the oration this year. In addition to his achievements in the legal profession, he is also a talented poet. I'm sure you will hear more about his diverse talents during the introduction of the orator. I'm also extremely happy and honored to have a past orator, Mr. Sanjeeva Senanayaka, introducing Mr. Panagoda today. Thank you, Mr. Senanayaka, for volunteering to perform this task, and I really appreciate your kind gesture. Without taking more of your time, I will conclude my welcome speech and pave way for the rest of the proceedings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dushmanta Karanagoda. May I now invite Mr. Sanjeeva Senanayaka to introduce this evening's orator.
Keith Ratna, Principal of Ananda College, teachers past and present, Vice Principals, the President of the OBA, Mr. Karanagoda, Vice President, Mr. Priyadarshana, fellow Anandians, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely happy and honored to introduce my good friend from our school days, Maitri Panagoda. He's a very humble, simple man, as you can see, but he has lots of achievements under his belt, which I will try and cover up in a few minutes. I think Maitri exemplifies the type of Anandian that our founders intended to produce, men who are educated in the broader sense of the word, who are socially conscious and of impeccable integrity. They are passionate, compassionate, and also diligent. Our motto is Appamado Amata Padam, which I think also carries a broader message. Appamado, in a sense, urges us to a life of action instead of wasting time on unproductive matters. Maitri has taken this to heart, as you can see, as his many and varied achievements will prove. He joined the college in the grade 6 in 1961, sometime back obviously, having had his early education in Gampaha, which is his parental home. And during his time at Ananda, he was a senior prefect. He also edited the college magazine. He took part in cadetting and swimming. And in 1969, which was his final year and mine too, he won a number of prizes, including 2 gold medals, and entered the Faculty of Law of the University of Ceylon. There he obtained a degree of Bachelor of Law, and thereafter he completed the Advocates exam at the Law College and was admitted as an attorney at law. He left for London in 1975 for postgraduate studies at Brunel University in London and was admitted as a solicitor of the Supreme Court of England. In 1977, after his return to Sri Lanka, Maitri married Ramya Nanayakara, who is here with us, a law student that he met in England. I happen to be his best man, so I can vouch for that event. They migrated to Australia in 1981 and moved to Dubbo, which is a country town in northwest New South Wales. And he started working for the Aboriginal Legal Service, which I will speak about a little more later. He found the work interesting and obviously in line with his social conscience. 10 years later, he moved in 1991, joined the prominent Sydney law firm, Carroll O'Day. It's an institution that has been in existence for over 100 years and is the largest legal firm in Sydney at the moment. He was soon made an associate and then a partner of the firm. He continued to represent Aboriginal people, which he started in Dubbo, and was involved in a large number of successful claims being brought by members of the so-called stolen generation, which he considers the biggest achievement of his career. For those who are not aware, the stolen generation is also known as stolen children. The Aboriginal children who were forcibly taken from their families by the Australian federal and state government agencies under their acts of their respective parliaments, and also by church missions. The removals were referred to as, the children were referred to as half-caste children, and that started around 1905 and continued into the 1970s. Around 20,000 to 25,000 children were estimated to have been removed from their families, ostensibly to improve their prospects by being trained to work in white society. Finally, in 2008, the Prime Minister at the time, Kevin Rudd, made an official apology in Parliament, but no compensation was considered or made. So this practical experience taught Maitri a lot about the inherent weaknesses in the legal system, racism as it applies today, and the need to do more for the disadvantaged and marginalized members of society. In his legal career, Maitri has successfully represented clients in a number of landmark cases in Australia. He completed a Master of Laws degree at the University of Sydney and also authored many articles on legal matters in journals and edited some chapters of what is called the Lawyer's Practice Manual. He has presented many seminars to the legal fraternity in New South Wales on personal injury law, an area in which he specialized. He is a member of the Specialist Accreditation Personal Injury Advisory Committee and an adjunct professor of the School of Law at the highly regarded University of Notre Dame in Sydney. In 2017, Maitri was made a member of the Order of Australia, which is a national honour awarded in recognition of outstanding achievements and service. The citation read, "For significant services to the Sri Lankan community in New South Wales and to the law, particularly in litigation and dispute." Maitri was also very interested in the arts, as someone mentioned a while ago, and started writing poetry and short stories, etc. while still a teenager, and he gradually progressed to composing lyrics for songs. He recorded a few songs at that time, which became popular. He also published a collection of poems titled Vasanta Udana novel. I hear that he once had an interest in becoming a professional journalist and actually went to England to study journalism and not law. But I guess he might say something about that. He continued to compose songs which were performed by many well-known Sinhala artists such as Pandit Amaradeva, Nanda Malini, Victor Ratnayaka, Sanath Nandasiri, Sunil Edirisinghe, Neela Wickramasinghe, T.M. Jayaratna and H.R. Jyotipala. Great musicians such as Dr. Premasiri Kemadasa, Dr. Rohana Veerasinghe, Dr. Lionel Algama, Dayaratna Radatunga and Justin Gallage composed the music for some of his lyrics. In 2011, he released a CD titled Sudu Ali, and last year he released two more. Simultaneously, he launched a collection of poetry titled Hada Mumunana Handa. That was last year. In addition to that, Maitri has been active within the Sri Lankan community in Australia. In addition to assisting those with legal problems, he has given radio talks and written community journals. He is one of the founding members of the past Anandians Association of New South Wales. After the tsunami in 2004, he joined other Sri Lankans to form Australanka Helpline to support the children orphaned by the tragic event. He is a director of Lanka Vision that provides a satellite television service to the Sri Lankans living in Australia and New Zealand. He has also been the editor-in-chief of SLE, which is the first Sri Lankan multimedia web magazine with eMag technology. I also understand that he had some involvement trying to redress that famous incident between Daryl Hare and Murali when it happened. Maitri has been many more achievements, but I'm sure by now you'll be more interested in listening to him than to me. So please visit his website, and there's a lot of details there. And in conclusion, let me just quote the late Tazi Vitachi, who was a famous journalist and an international civil servant that was also produced by Ananda. And he wrote in one of our school magazines that school is a part of society's progressive purpose and not a graded box. in which children are placed to cram their heads with lessons which equip them only to earn a livelihood. And we can see clearly that Maitri Panagoda, by the way he conducted his life, served the progressive purpose of many societies. I'm sure that we have a very interesting and thought-provoking evening ahead of us. Thank you.
Distinguished Chief Guest and Orator, Mr. Maitri Panagoda, to deliver the Olcott Oration of 2019.
Thank you, Sanjeeva, for that most generous introduction. Extremely kind of you. Maha Sangratne Navsarai, Venerable Sirs, my teachers at Ananda and at university who are present here, Mr. Kirti Ratna, His Excellency Honorable David Holly, the High Commissioner for Australia in Sri Lanka, Honorable Judges of various jurisdictions in Sri Lanka, fellow members of the legal profession, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, prefects and students of Ananda College. I'm indeed proud and honored to be here on this stage exactly 50 years after I left Ananda College to enter the law faculty of the then University of Ceylon. It was the year 1969. Colonel Rajapaksa was the principal. He had been my English teacher in the upper classes. I believe he was able to extract the best out of both educators and those who were being educated. I must confess that my own life story is one that was very much influenced and driven and inspired by the likes of men such as Colonel Rajapaksa, and of course by my own father, who also taught at Ananda College during the war years. As Anandians, we must also be proud of some of our great former principals who played a pivotal role in protecting Buddhism when the country was under foreign occupation in the colonial era, such as Dr. Mallasekara, Mr. P.D.S. Kularatna, L.H. Mettananda, S.A. Vijaytilaka, and Mr. Karunananda. Before proceeding any further, I must thank the organizers, the Ananda College All Boys Association, for extending to me the privilege of delivering this prestigious Olcott Oration. My sincere appreciation to Dushmanta Karan Nagoda and the Executive Committee. This oration is in honor of a man whose commitment to Buddhism and thereby to a just society has had a lasting and profound impact on the lives of generations of people. Today, we are celebrating Colonel Olcott's incredible life, career, and legacy. In an article that he wrote in 1891 under the title Fundamental Beliefs of Buddhism, he said, Buddhists are taught to show the same tolerance, forbearance, and brotherly love to all men without distinction. In another article titled Life of Buddha and Its Lessons, he wrote, Buddha found that the social differences between men were arbitrary and elusive. Caste bred hatred and selfishness, riches, strife, envy, and malice. In 1894, he founded a school in India for the children of poor and destitute families, the Harijanas. As I understand it, the school still continues to provide free education for children from underprivileged backgrounds. Colonel Olcott heaps praise on the Emperor Ashoka as being the most powerful monarch in Indian history, as warrior and as statesman. He goes on to say, but his noblest characteristics were his love of truth and justice, tolerance of religious differences, equity of government, kindness to the sick, to the poor, and to animals. Colonel Olcott was instrumental in establishing the Colombo Buddhist Theosophical Society and became its founding president. The mission of the society included the establishment of orphanages and homes for the aged, to grant assistance to people affected by natural disasters. Also, the establishment of a center for the strengthening of universal brotherhood without distinction of race, religion, sex, caste, or color. These are the aspects of social justice we must aspire to achieve for the future generations. Of course, the theme of my talk today is the rule of law, that the rule of law needs to play in achieving this task. Colonel Olcott made representations to the British colonial government on behalf of the Sinhala Buddhist community. He played a vital role during the Buddhist Christian riots at Kotahena in 1883 in order to bring the perpetrators to justice. We are the proud recipients of his lifelong dedication and commitment for the good of all people. Colonel Olcott was himself a lawyer by profession and specialized in insurance law. Here, I draw a parallel with my own career, which I will be spelling out in a moment with a great deal of humility. As mentioned by Sanjeeva Senanayak in his introduction, after taking my oaths in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, I proceeded to England for higher studies, and I later migrated to Australia. I have been practicing law in Australia for nearly 4 decades. Never having worked in the legal profession in my motherland, my knowledge of the law and practice in Sri Lanka is somewhat inadequate. My comments, therefore, are based on my experience in the legal field in Australia. Social justice is a universal concept. So is the rule of law. These are important and strong pillars of any modern society. These phrases drive us towards achieving equality and fairness in the society. Social justice as a concept goes back to the time of Socrates and Aristotle, 500 to 400 BC. Questions such as, what is a just society and who is a just man, were vigorously debated during that time. These fascinating dialogues underpinned what we now know as Western law. There is a whole area of law known as sociological jurisprudence, developed by Professor Julius Stone of Australia, Professor Wolfgang Freeman of Columbia Law School, and Professors Myers McDougall and Harold Laswell of Yale Law School. Their fundamental line of thinking is that law must evolve from people's needs rather than forced upon them from the top down. Siddhartha Gautama, the enlightened Buddha, asserted that the adoption of self-control and self-development was more effective than control imposed by the rulers when he taught Veramani Sikkhapadam Samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from. The Buddha's teachings foreshadowed what the modern world recognizes as an essential Dhamma, when he incorporated the principles of human rights into his teachings. In Karaniya Metta Sutta, he says, all those wishing to attain a state of peace must be able, upright, perfectly upright, amenable to correction, gentle and humble. Also, just as a mother would protect her only child with her own life, let him cultivate boundless thoughts of loving kindness towards all beings. Chapter 11 of the Chulavagga Sutta lays down rules addressing offences within the monastic community. These are in line with the modern concepts of justice and fairness. All human beings are entitled to justice. The law and its operation must be fair, and it must treat everyone equally. It was Aristotle who said, at his best, man is the noblest of all creatures. Separated from law and justice, he is the worst. The functioning of institutions set up to ensure security, dignity and justice is paramount to the well-being of all human beings. When they fail, human beings become helpless, dependent and despondent. Global human rights discourses, whether by philosophers, religious leaders or jurists, are built upon deep foundations based on these values. Throughout my legal career in Australia, it has been my privilege, as has been mentioned before, to represent the voiceless, marginalized people, the disadvantaged, that is, those who do not have a voice or who have been silenced. In Australia, I felt honoured to represent the interests of Indigenous community, that is, Aboriginal people who have a history of 65,000 years of existence in Australia. Where everything else fails, it is the rule of law that will ensure social justice. It is incumbent, especially for those of us in the legal profession, to strive for justice, for that has been the fundamental purposes of our learning the law. It is important to emphasize that law and justice are not synonymous. Law is a social regulator, justice is a moral indicator. Law is a means to an end, the end being securing justice. It is a paramount duty of every citizen to ensure that law is used as an instrument of achieving justice, not as a tool of oppression. As far back as 1690, John Locke observed, wherever law ends, tyranny begins. Law is there to protect the rights of individuals. In order to do that, certain aspects of freedom need to be restricted. Over the years and around the world, legislatures have taken steps to replace primitive social practices as well as emerging social issues with new laws. Some examples that come to mind are forced marriages, domestic violence, discrimination based on race, gender, religion, and sexual orientation, disability rights, environmental issues, animal rights, so on and so forth. A key issue today is whether the wheels of justice move efficiently and in a timely manner, particularly in Sri Lanka. In practical terms, do all citizens have equal access to legal services to seek justice? At the beginning of my legal career, I developed a keen interest in the law of torts, known as delict in Sri Lanka and in South Africa. I found that it was an excellent vehicle to achieve social justice. This area of the law is to do with civil wrongs as opposed to criminal acts. It could be a negligent act, such as running down a pedestrian, or an international tort, such as false imprisonment. This provides a means in which the law can interfere with relationships between private individuals to correct a form of conduct or wrong. This is an ever-expanding area of the legal system. In Australia, we have professional negligence, which includes breach of duty of care by doctors towards patients, engineers, architects, accountants towards their customers, and of course between lawyers and clients. We have public liability and product liability. Aggrieved parties are entitled to claim damages and compensation for their losses. My very first experience in Australia was representing a 25-year-old Aboriginal man. This was in 1981, who had been wrongfully arrested and unlawfully detained for alleged drunken and disorderly behavior. Heavy-handedness on the part of the police, particularly towards Aboriginal people, was not an uncommon practice in certain parts of Australia at that time. There was medical evidence that the blood test showed no signs of alcohol intake, and he was acquitted by the magistrates. The man turned out to be a lay preacher who never drank alcohol. We sued the police for wrongful arrest, and the matter went before a jury consisting of 4 white Australian men. The jury gave a verdict in favour of our client and awarded compensation against the police. This is just one example of how the rule of law can be instrumental in achieving social justice. Another important case that I was involved in was called Kuru, K-U-R-U, versus State of New South Wales. One night in Sydney, a man and a woman had a noisy argument in their apartment. A neighbour heard it and called the police. 6 police officers rushed to the apartment block. By the time the police came, everything was quiet. The woman had left. There were 2 elderly men related to the family who were sitting inside when the police knocked on the front door. The men allowed the police to come in. They searched the unit and were told that the woman had gone to her sister's place. Another man emerged from the bathroom wearing short pants. He was the occupier of the apartment. He asked the police to leave. An argument ensued between the man and the police. Then there was a scuffle. The man was handcuffed behind his back and marched out. He fell down the stairs and suffered injuries. He alleged that the police in fact pushed him down the stairs with hands tied to his back. He was still charged with a number of offences, including resisting arrest, but was acquitted. We sued the police, seeking compensation and damages. The civil claim for compensation went through the appeal process and finally to the High Court, which is the highest court in Australia. The High Court held that the police had no right to remain in the apartment after they were asked to leave. The man received a large financial settlement. One of the judges cited a remark made by an English judge many decades ago. The wind may enter a shack, the rain may come through the roof, but no one else can enter without permission, enter someone's shack or the palace. A man's home is his castle. This is the power of law in a democracy where the law is allowed to operate. The man was from a working class background. He had the courage to take on the mighty police and win. I had the privilege of acting for this man. The case and its findings are now taught in university law courses as an example of justice prevailing over abuse of power. I want to say a few things about the Indigenous Australians. When the Europeans came to Australia over 200 years ago, they treated the country as not being inhabited. The Latin word is terra nullius, meaning no one's land. So they were able to impose their own legal system on the erroneous assumption that the country had not been occupied by humans. It is estimated that over 750,000 Aboriginal people lived on the land in 1788. Despite this, Captain Cook declared sovereignty and used the concept of terra nullius to justify the dispossession of lands of the original inhabitants. In June 1992, after a 10-year legal battle waged by an Aboriginal elder named Eddie Mabo, the High Court of Australia overturned the doctrine of terra nullius and held that native title existed for all Indigenous people in Australia prior to the establishment of the British colony of New South Wales in 1788. This decision altered the foundation of land law in Australia. This is another classic example of achieving social justice through the rule of law. There is a saying that white Australia has a black history. With the arrival of the Europeans, the original inhabitants not only lost their beloved land, but also their culture, their languages, and beliefs. The rulers, the white rulers, soon set about trying to eradicate the black race. Babies and children were removed from their families on the pretext of finding them a better life. Boys were raised to work in farms. Girls were trained to be domestic servants. They were punished for speaking their tribal languages. They were forced to discard their religious beliefs and convert to Christianity. These children suffered all forms of physical and psychological abuse. As Sanjeev mentioned, they are now identified as the stolen generations. A large number of them led sad and deprived lives. There were many political struggles seeking justice for the stolen generations. As we heard before, these led to an apology by the Prime Minister of Australia with the support of the opposition. I had the privilege of connecting with the Aboriginal community in my early days in Australia. This bond helped me to win their confidence and to be retained as their lawyer in seeking compensation for their losses. I had a great team of young lawyers who were empathetic to the cause and who were brilliant in their work, which led to the achieving of a measure of justice for the stolen generations. Thanks to the democratic institutions and the basic concept of fairness that prevails in Australia, and the independence of judiciary and the separation of powers, we have been able to take legal action against the government for their past wrongs. As I speak, we have been able to resolve over 245 claims for members of the stolen generations. Each one of them received a sincere, personal, face-to-face apology on behalf of the government. They offered lifetime counseling and they received financial compensation. Another important step that the authorities can take to address issues of injustice is affirmative action. The term affirmative action was first used in the USA during the presidencies of John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. The laws passed required employers to take positive steps to hire people without bias based on race, religion, national origin, and gender. Australia has come a long way in taking positive steps to protect its citizens from discrimination and harassment. Australia has recognized and accepted its obligations under a number of international human rights treaties. The Commonwealth Government has implemented some of those obligations through legislation such as the Racial Discrimination Act, Sex Discrimination Act, Disability Discrimination Act, and Age Discrimination Act. In 1986, the Commonwealth Government established the Human Rights Commission. In 2017, following a national plebiscite, the Australian Parliament almost unanimously passed marriage equality legislation. In addition to the federal legislation, each state and territory has equal opportunity and anti-discrimination agencies with statutory responsibilities. It has been recognized that affirmative action, also called reverse discrimination, needs to be taken in order to correct past wrongs. What it means is that governments need to go beyond the concept of formal equality. It must allow different groups to be treated differently in order to promote substantive equality. For example, children in rural areas, be it in Australia or Sri Lanka, who do not have access to educational opportunities that those in capital cities have, deserve a lower bar to get into universities. In South Africa, the apartheid governments favoured Afrikaner-owned companies as a matter of state policy, which in effect excluded employment for black people. Since the transition to democracy in 1994, all employers have been compelled by law to employ non-white people. This process came to be known as black economic empowerment. This is another perfect example of achieving social justice through the rule of law. In the USA, Brown versus Board of Education is a landmark Supreme Court case in which the justices ruled unanimously in 1954 that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. In that case, a father filed a class action against the Board of Education when his daughter was deprived and denied entrance to an all-white elementary school. He argued that segregation violated the equal protection assured by the American Constitution. In delivering the judgment, Justice Warren wrote, "In public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place, as segregated schools are inherently unequal." The following year, in 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus. This sparked a movement leading to boycotts sittings and demonstrations, many of them led by Martin Luther King. The result was far-reaching and paved the way for the passing of Civil Rights Act 1964, Voting Rights Act 1965, and the Fair Housing Act 1968. In Australia now, some universities run what is known as social justice clinics, offering students hands-on legal experience under the supervision of experienced human rights and public interest lawyers. Students get the opportunity to work on real-world social justice cases, undertaking a range of activities including legal research and writing, client interviewing, and non-legal advocacy. The aim is to prepare students for work in the social justice advocacy area. There have been a number of cases where Australian courts have given recognition to issues of human rights and equal opportunities. This is an acknowledgement of the conscience of the country. Let me now mention two landmark human rights cases in Australia. One was by a partner of a Sydney law firm, a female, who brought a complaint against her employer after her request to work part-time following the birth of her child was refused. She claimed that the firm had given away her entitlement to maternity leave. The Human Rights Commission found that the employer violated her human rights by requiring her to work full-time in order to maintain her practice. She was awarded monetary compensation. Another case, Maguire versus Sydney Olympics. Just before the Sydney Olympics in year 2000, Bruce Maguire lodged a complaint against the organizers of the Sydney Olympics for failing to provide its website and ticketing information in a format accessible to people with vision impairment. The website developer confirmed that some parts of the site were not accessible. However, the Olympic organization argued that correcting the site would cause unjustifiable hardship and enormous expenses. The Commission disagreed and ordered the organizers to upgrade the website prior to the start of the Games and provide information in Braille. Mr. Maguire was awarded compensation. Rule of law in Sri Lanka. I mentioned at the outset that my personal experience in the practical legal world in Sri Lanka is limited. However, I have been a keen observer of the operation of the rule of law in this country over the past 40 to 50 years. It would be a gross understatement to say that the concepts of rule of law and separation of powers in Sri Lanka have caused concern over the years. It is not difficult to identify instances when people of Sri Lanka displayed their lack of trust and confidence in the justice system of the country. I read a statement issued by the Bar Association on the 28th of November 2015, which went, "It is unfortunate that existing judicial and prosecutorial system have not met the confidence of many concerned. It is an undeniable fact that over a period of time, the independence and credibility of the many of these institutions have suffered due to many reasons, resulting in an erosion of the confidence in the system as a whole." In his ceremonial address, the former Chief Justice K. Sripawan said, "It is for the judiciary to uphold the constitutional values and to enforce the constitutional limitations. That is the essence of the rule of law. credibility of the judiciary rests in the faith of the people. Indispensable to that faith is the independence of the judiciary. In my view, an executive president may well have powers to pardon criminals. But if one goes beyond the protocol and the established practices in the world and start pardoning murderers and very serious criminals who have been found guilty through due process and through properly constituted courts of law, then we have a problem. I recall being shocked and perplexed a few years ago when I read that there were proposals to set up a hybrid judicial system. Sri Lanka has produced some of the best legal minds in the world. We are a sovereign nation and we have a well-established legal system. We have eminent lawyers and judges. Some are here in the audience. Why do we need outsiders to judge our issues? If there has been an erosion of trust and confidence, well, it needs to be fixed. Restoring impartiality, confidence, equal access to justice. These pillars must be strengthened. Importing foreign labor, foreign judges, is not the solution in my view. I want to now turn to Buddhism and social justice. As today's event is taking place on the hallowed grounds of Ananda College, it is imperative for me to also reflect on the concept of social justice based on Buddhist theory. Ideally speaking, the ultimate goal of every Buddhist is the attainment of inner peace through the experience of enlightenment. We call this nirvana. This is an ontological discourse aspiring for inner salvation through inner transformation of the self. If that is so, does it mean that Buddhism is not concerned with issues of social justice? Does it mean that an individual aiming for spiritual growth and salvation can turn a blind eye to wider social issues? The answer to both questions, in my view, is no. The term social justice may only have come to prominence in the 18th century. That was the time when the Western world woke up to issues such as political equality, universal franchise, abolition of slavery, fair distribution of wealth, and the much wider concept of human rights. I would argue that Buddhist ontological struggle for personal enlightenment can comfortably encompass the noble idea of social justice. The key Buddhist ideal of selflessness contains within it all the modern concepts of equality and fairness. Sangha organization was set up on the basis of equality. After guiding his first 5 disciples to enlightenment by delivering Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra at Isipatanarama, Gautama Buddha urged them to go out to the community. Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya. Go forth, bhikkhus, go and preach the law to the world. Work for the good of others, for the welfare and happiness of the masses, as well as for your own. Out of compassion for the world, let no two of you take the same way. In Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva postponed his own transition to nirvana and chose to be born again and again so that he could help others to reach salvation by attaining Buddhahood. It is consistently acknowledged that the social structure in Sri Lanka is based on Buddhist concepts. It follows that modern legal principles such as rule of law and separation of powers, although imported from the Western world, are not only consistent with the values espoused by Buddhism, but also a vitally important ingredient in ensuring the establishment and maintenance of a just society in Sri Lanka. The question should be asked, does the Buddhist establishment cater to the needs of those who are facing human suffering? In this context, it is relevant to consider a social framework based on the 4 modes of sublime conduct: metta, loving kindness; mudita, appreciative joy; karuna, compassion; and upeksha, equanimity. These 4 values embodied in Buddhism are a hallmark of a just and fair society. Isn't it time that we focus our attention on practical ways that temples and Sangha organizations can render services to those experiencing hardship? Social justice and sentient beings. Sri Lanka is the heir to a rich and unique pre-colonial history in respect to animal welfare. Historical rock inscriptions and ancient chronicles such as Mahavamsa reveal that extensive state protection was granted to animals. These historical sources further reveal that the ethic of ahimsa, non-violence, a cardinal tenet in Buddhism and Hinduism, was deeply respected and practiced in the pre-colonial era. The trusteeship power of the state was extended to protect animals, birds, and other living creatures of the land, pursuant to a moving plea made by Arahat Mahinda to King Devanam Piyatissa in their very first encounter at Mihintale about 2,300 years ago. Today in Western countries, there is a growing movement to give recognition to the rights of animals through legislation as a part of an evolving social justice program. For example, the Australian Capital Territory became the first jurisdiction in Australia to change the legal status of animals from being purely property to sentient beings in their own rights, that they can feel. 2 months ago, in September 2019, the Australian Capital Territory passed animal welfare legislation to protect cats, dogs and other pets, also farmyard animals. Dogs cannot be tied up for more than 24 hours without exercise. Farm animals cannot be kept in any form of confinement that restricts their ability to move. Being a predominantly Buddhist country, Sri Lanka must accept the moral challenge to be in step with legislative reform rapidly taking place in the developed world to bring animals within the fold of sentient beings, worthy of extending respect and dignity, and bring animals within the ambit of social justice and rule of law. Reflecting on the vision of Colonel Olcott in the sphere of social justice, I pose the question, can we as Anandians be satisfied that we have done enough to safeguard the principles of social justice? Are we equipped to tackle the emerging social problems in an effective way and give leadership to the younger generation? Do we maintain the values taught by our great educators after entering university, becoming professionals in different fields, or by migrating to other countries? These are the issues we need to ponder over. I began by saying that it is almost 50 years since I left Ananda College. For me, today is a nostalgia day. As learned Greek scholar James Rogers said, nostalgia comes from the Greek word nostos, meaning to return home. According to the Oxford Dictionary, it is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past. This is the exact sentiment that I am experiencing at the moment. It was in 1969, half a century ago, that I last stepped onto this stage. It was the annual prize giving, and the chief guest was the Governor General William Gopal. Some of my fellow prize winners on that day are present here today. In particular, I mentioned Sanjeeva Senanayake and Professor Sudarshan Seneviratne. There is a photograph of the three of us gazing at the Fritz Kuhn's prize that Sanjeev and Sudarshan had won. All three with shiny black hair, something that all three of us seem to have sacrificed along the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maitri Panagoda. Ladies and gentlemen, Colonel Henry Steele Olcott was a lawyer himself. He was once called an unmitigated rascal. He had no obligation to come to Ceylon and help the Buddhists. Yet, by some luck, he made his way to Ceylon, and today we have this sacred place called Ananda. Mr. Maitri Panagoda had his education from Ananda, went to the Faculty of Law at the University of Ceylon, went to Australia, and is now fighting for the Aboriginals of Australia. I believe we can see some sort of equivalence over there in Mr. Maitri Panagoda now becoming the voice, being the voice behind these Indigenous people in Australia. So I believe Mr. Maitri Panagoda deserves a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, a Sri Lankan, an Anandian, fighting for the Aboriginals in Australia. That being said, I'd like to invite the principal of Ananda College, Mr. S.M. Kirtiratne, together with the president of the Old Boys Association, Mr. Dushmanta Karannagoda, and vice president of the Old Boys Association and project chairman of Olcott Oration 2019, Mr. Asanga Priyadarshana, to present our distinguished orator, Mr. Mike.
Thank you. Venerable Mahasangha, Mr. Maitri Panagoda, our distinguished former Anandian and speaker today evening, Mr. S.M. Kirtiratne, Principal of Ananda College, Executive President of Ananda College All Boys Association, Mr. Dushmanta Karannagoda, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Since the inception of Ananda College All Boys Association in 1908, under the presidency of the first Sri Lankan principal of Ananda College, Sir D.V. Jayatilaka, the Olcott Oration has been a significant event in the OBS calendar. Over the years, this annual event has given us privilege of witnessing eminent Anandian alumni share their perspectives and knowledge on a range of relevant topics of national interest in memory of our founders and their ideas. Mr. Panagoda, this year was no different. In fact, your oration has raised the bar of what we have come to expect from the oration to new heights. On behalf of the Old Boys Association of Ananda College, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you for accepting our invitation to deliver this year's oration and adding to its legacy. An event like this requires vision and execution to become a reality each year, with many people working as a team to deliver a common goal. Foremost, on behalf of the OBE of Ananda College, I would like to thank the Principal, Mr. S.M. Kirtiratne, for gracing this occasion and for his counsel given to us at all times in organizing this event. I also wish to express my sincere appreciation to past principals, present and past teachers of the college, Executive President Dushmanta Karannagoda, past presidents and members of the Executive Committee of Ananda College All Boys Association, Sri Lanka Army, heads and members of media, presidents and members of the affiliated groups, head prefect and the prefect guild, management and staff of OB office, management and staff of SDS and the staff of Kuratna Hall for their assistance in organizing the Olcott Oration 2019. I would also like to acknowledge our financial sponsors for their generosity. This event would not be possible without your support, and we appreciate your continued patronage. I would like to conclude by drawing on the words of the illustrious physicist, mathematician, astronomer, and inventor Sir Isaac Newton, who said, I quote, "If I have seen further, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." The giants who have made this event a reality in 2019 are a team of very motivated and dedicated professionals who make up the organizing committee. Thank you for your voluntary involvement and tireless efforts to uphold the traditions of this event and for exceeding expectations. It has been my privilege to serve alongside you. Finally, it is you, the audience, that makes this event meaningful. Thank you for attending Olcott Oration 2019. Without you, this event would not have been a success. I wish you all a pleasant evening and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Asanga Priyadarshana. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this celebrated evening of tribute and remembrance to Colonel Henry Steele Olcott is almost at an end. In retrospect of Colonel Henry Steele Olcott, we looked upon achieving social justice through the rule of law, with Mr. Maitri Panagoda delivering the most illustrious Olcott Oration of 2019. Mr. Panagoda took us through a few of the actual cases that he had to take care over there in Australia, and he took an example of many of the cases that he took care of in Australia in an Australian context. And just as much as we all have been a part of Ananda, I think it's a safe lesson for all of us to learn that if you want to voice out something and if you want to voice out for a certain people, do voice out, ladies and gentlemen, and always make sure to count and make every day count. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Old Boys Association, I'd like to once again thank each and every soul who played a role in organizing the Olcott Oration 2019. On that note, once again, I'd like to remind everyone, especially to the youngsters seated over here, that something my father would often tell me, he himself is a distinguished old Anandian, that you will not realize the importance and value of wearing that tie or that badge and that crest on your chest and wearing that uniform during your school time. You will only understand the value of it once you leave school and once you've left this school once and for all. It's been 2 years, almost 3 years for me, ladies and gentlemen, leaving school and having the chance to once again wear this tie and coming back to school. It gives me a great pleasure and an honor. It's been my honor on behalf of the organizing committee to actually come here and compere for you, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to leave you with just one thought. I've also had the good fortune of walking the corridors of Ananda for 14 years from 2003, and I am blessed, I am fortunate, and I am lucky to have been a part of Ananda. And I'm thankful to my father, of course, for putting me to Ananda, and I wish that the lesson I leave with you today will be carried on for many generations. And to all the prefects who are here today, please make sure to always give a very good example to all the juniors and all the youngsters in school today, and make sure that this legacy carries on for many generations of Ananda so that they understand the true value of being an Anandian and why Ananda is still the pinnacle it is today, even after 133 years after its establishment. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been my absolute honor and privilege, and I hope to see you next year as well. My name is Thilina Udayaratna. It's been a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again to the Old Boys Association. I'd like to ask you all to indulge yourselves to food and beverages laid outside and at the Centenary Hall. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again and enjoy the rest of the evening.